We are live.
Good afternoon. I'm Shanika Smith, the Chair of Equity and Engagement Committee. I'd like to welcome you all to the June 20th, 2023 remote meeting. All council committee members and staff are participating virtually. For those of you out there today, welcome. For today's meeting, we have the option for people to call in and comment live during the meeting. To call in and comment live, use the number 855-925-2801, meeting code 2689. Your phone will be muted and you'll hear the meeting live. At this point, speakers will need to push *3 to enter the speaker queue. I'll now go through and introduce all committee members and staff who are participating virtually. We also have the chair and vice chair. Maybe not. I think this may be a whole script. But Brenda Mills is going to give us an update on the Reparations Commission's meeting. So I'll introduce our staff members who are participating virtually. Just give a quick hello. Councilwoman Sage Turner.
Hello.
Councilwoman Kim Roney.
Good afternoon.
Assistant City Manager Rachel Wood.
Good afternoon.
Director of Communication and Public Engagement Dawa Hitch.
Good afternoon.
Director of Equity and Inclusion Brenda Mills.
Good afternoon.
And City Attorney Brad Branham.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Yeah, my script's a little wonky today. I didn't read through it ahead of time, but welcome everybody. We'll get into the agenda now. We'll start off with, let me go to, well, I guess we could do the approval of minutes from our last meeting. That's May 16th. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved. Second.
I'll do a roll call vote for approval. Councilwoman Turner.
Aye.
Councilwoman Roney.
Aye.
And myself, aye. Motion carries. And now we're going to kick it to Ms. Brenda Mills, and she's going to give us the Reparations Commission status update. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and welcome everybody and good afternoon. Next slide, Katie. So just to give you a general update of the last meeting, which was June the 12th, we actually met on the second Monday because of Juneteenth being yesterday. So they heard several updates and about some key items. We're continuing to hear from our impact focus areas or IFAs, housing, criminal justice, and economic development. Gave a report, update on the Stop the Harm audit scope of work, the July 29th upcoming Community Reparations Commission retreat agenda topics. We kind of reviewed those for a few minutes. An update from Arteria Collective, formerly Writers in the Schools, regarding their work with youth, documenting the reparations projects. And then we're starting to hear from our legacy community neighborhoods, and Burton Street was that night. Next slide. So as I said, we heard updates from housing, criminal justice, and economic development impact focus areas. What you're going to begin to see starting in the September meeting is our impact focus areas will be providing us the fully fleshed out recommendations. The full commission will hear those recommendations. And then at the next meeting, we'll vote on them, especially if there are any questions or concerns or whatever. We're still working out a general process for those, and then how do we want to bring those to City Council. So we'll be checking in with you soon around that situation. But they seem to be doing really well. There are some struggles with a few because of the types of data that they need, but I just want to give big kudos to Catherine Cutshaw and her team over at Special Collections. They're doing some research for us. A lot of these requests will require some level of research, so she's starting to get a lot of that done, and we're really excited about that. We provided them an update about the audit scope of work. The RFPs were received. We received 3 on June the 8th. They closed on June the 8th. We have an evaluation team, which includes the 4 members of the Community Reparations Commission, city and county staff. We're still on schedule to do everything. We interview all of the respondents next Monday and Tuesday. We're in the process of reviewing the responses and doing a preliminary evaluation. So we'll be ready for next week. Next slide. And we were really excited because we had about 6 or 7 firms that showed up. So we're really excited that we got some responses for that. We looked at the topics, some general topics for the Community Reparations Commission retreat, which will be on Saturday, July 29th. At this point, the main gist of that is to bring the impact focused area teams together. You know, they generally meet one meeting a month on the third Monday, unless there's a schedule change. And then they all 5 meet individually. Some of them meet twice a month, some of them don't. But this will be a time to bring them all together to kind of they've been looking at over the last few months, how their work intersects with each other. So it'll be a lot of that. I'm really excited to say that we were able to find a facilitator that we're really excited about, Vernisha Crawford, CEO of Trauma Informed Institute. We had a chat with her city county staff last week and our project manager. We were really impressed with her. She will facilitate the full retreat on that day. So we'll have more of an agenda firm in the next week or so.
Could you say her name again?
Her name is Vernisha Crawford. She's the CEO of Trauma Informed Care.
Okay,
Trauma
that name rings a bell.
Institute, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Very impressed with her. In dealing with trauma, we know that that's what we deal with as African Americans. And so we've had a little bit of that, show up from time to time, in dealing with a lot of this stuff. So I think it'll be really good. She's a really good listener. She has done some work like this before. And so we're really excited about her. Arteria Collective, Liz Garland, who is working as a contractor with the county, is working with a team of youth, and they have been doing video and historical stuff, just kind of pulling things together from a youth perspective. So they kind of gave us an update around what they've been doing and interviews that they're having. I get to get interviewed by them this week. And so I'm really excited about that. They're doing a really good job. Liz is doing a good job with them. We're hoping to bring them back now more regularly so that they can report back to us about what they're doing. We will have them there for the retreat. And we're also planning an engagement summit sometime in the fall. So they'll be a part of that. We heard a report from Burton Street. Dwayne Barton currently serves as the president of the association. And he just kind of talked about who Burton Street is, what their origins are, what are kind of some of their concerns. We're asking each legacy neighborhood in general to talk a little bit about their history, but we want to kind of know, what kind of things are great, what kind of things do you need support with, how does what we're doing fit, with what they're doing. And so it was a really good presentation. So we'll hear from the rest of the legacy neighborhoods in August. That'll be probably most of our meeting. Next slide. So we heard from our impact focus areas. We're always excited to hear from them. I do want to say that if you are interested in attending those, you are welcome to come. They would welcome you to see some of our council members there. They're doing a lot of good work. We have really good facilitators. We've added the chief civil rights officer over at the county. So she's really comes with that health background around consultation and things. And so she's been a really big help to the health and wellness IFA. So we're just giving them as much support we can as a city and county and with our facilitators. Update on Stop the Harm. We're really excited that we hope we'll be able, I think we should be able to announce the first week of July or maybe the second week who the firm we're going with will be. And then the retreat is planned for the 29th. So we're getting ready for that. We'll have that at Harrah's. Just because it's a big group and it is open to the public. Really excited to meet with Arteria Collective this week to do my interview, but they're really doing some really great work and really excited about it. And then, like I said, we'll continue to heard from Burton Street. We'll hear from the rest of the legacy communities and for the people out there who don't, when I'm saying legacy, there's 7 communities that were a part of the reparations, and that's the group we're talking about. So it's the Shallow, East End Valley Street, Stumptown, Asheville Housing Authority, all of those neighborhoods, North Side, all of those will be a part of this, giving us a presentation. So we're really excited about that. And that's my presentation. I'll answer any questions any of you may have.
This is Kim. I don't have any questions, but I did just want to lift up a couple things that I heard at the meeting that you touched on. One is around the youth presence, engagement, and appreciation. So when the Arteria Collective, formerly Word on the Street in Vosto, this Jóvenes, gave their presentation, one of the things I heard the student age person say is that they didn't know a lot about the reparations process, but they were learning through this and saw how important it was. And I think because that person shared their story of that the person who's usually behind the camera, who's listening to people's stories, was speaking instead of behind the camera, it was really moving. And I could tell not just in that moment, but in the round table afterwards, wrapping up the meeting, several of the Reparations Commission members noted that it was really important to have youth engaged, that this was an appropriate way, that they said they felt this was the appropriate way to have them engaged, and that they wanted to hear more. So just wanted to lift that up. A second thing was around the Burton Street presentation. What I heard, again, because I've heard it before, is that the neighborhood plans are a really important part of the storytelling and the documentation and a pathway to what repair looks like. So those are just some of the things that I heard, and thank you for your update, Brenda.
Absolutely. Thank you for your compliments. We appreciate it.
Sage, got anything?
No, but I do appreciate that invite to attend some of those, so I will look into that. Yeah.
Brenda, repeat what you said earlier about the IFAs having conversations with one another, because when I watched the playback from last Monday, I saw where there were some recommendations from maybe economic development, and other IFAs were getting really excited because they had it in discussion, but they hadn't presented as one of their possible recommendations. So how is that collaboration going to work?
So that's going to work. Actually, when they give updates, they're really not supposed to be bringing recommendations. They're just supposed to be bringing what they're working towards, like any information they need. We gave them a data update the prior meeting. They have access to, a data dashboard. But a lot of education is making the rounds with all the IFAs. So they're just sending representatives from their group to other IFAs. And then during the retreat, we haven't worked out everything, but we're gonna hear from all of them. And then we're gonna talk about where they intersect in terms of when you talk about criminal justice stuff, yeah, there are things that you can do, but there's also an education piece to that. Or with housing, that's an economic development situation as well. And so they began to look at how they kind of intersect, how all of that stuff works together. But we're going to talk about it more with them during the retreat and try to flesh more of that out. So we're hoping that they're going to be, visiting each other's meetings, as well as this time that we're taking out 4 or 5 hours to really sit down and talk about the types of recommendations. And we've given them a general process, but as you can tell, they really want to get it right. And so that kind of is a little nerve-wracking for them, but I think they're doing a really great job with it.
And I heard some ongoing conversations about including community voice in the process. So they were intentionally scheduling their meetings in the community. How is that engagement?
So several ways, which was, that was a great question because I was asking the chair about that. So we're looking at a summit, an engagement summit, September, October. So that will be a time that we can bring what recommendations we have thus far and get community feedback, and looking at having some level of a follow-up summit. In the meantime, really push for them to attend the IFA meetings. I'm going to be updating more of the information in the urban news. The CAKE teams on both city and county have done a really great job of giving recaps of the meetings, what kind of things we're doing. And as you can imagine with community, it's very hard to understand reparations, right? So one of the things that we're going to do at the retreat is really kind of hone in on what do you guys consider reparations, right? Because at the outset, what we're doing is not technically reparations. And so they're going to kind of come to that point. But I think we're hitting them in all kind of ways we can, in the different ways that we can, just because everybody doesn't go on Facebook, or everybody doesn't do Twitter, or everybody doesn't do neighborhood next door, right? So we're trying to hit them in all kinds of ways. But the engagement, we are very much holding tight that we'll be able to show. There's a documentary called The Big Payback that Erica Alexander and her partner did around reparations in Evanston. So we're hoping to bring that here and then just have some discussion around, what are some things, what are some hopes, what are some ideas that people have, what kind of concerns are we hearing now? And we will be also working more with our agencies out there, like the Racial Justice Coalition and others.
Yeah, so I hear dialogue, collaboration, popcorn, funnel cakes, and
Yes, all of the above.
all
And
of it.
then the other thing is to make the rounds in the neighborhood. So we're still putting community engagement together. Attending neighborhood meetings is a great way to give people feedback. Now, if you know anything about neighborhood meetings, not everybody goes. So we have to figure out a way to go to the neighborhood meeting, get that information out, and then for example, Shiloh has a phone, has a robocall. So they call generally about 60 to 70% of their residents get a call. So does Burger Street. East End has a newsletter and an email list. So we're getting it out. I'm seeing people forward it. I'm still on people's neighborhood list. So I'm seeing people forward stuff to the residents. And then I'm just fielding calls. We are looking at some things maybe at the top of the year where we can just we've got now our recommendations. We're still trying to put those together and really just talking to people about where they are with everything. I think they're just waiting for something to happen, actually.
Great.
Thank you for that question.
Thank you, Brenda. Thank you always. And kind of on the same topic, since Dahl is up next, I'm wondering if we'll be prepared to do any type of hybrid meeting for the engagement summit. Just throwing that out there.
Well, I'll see if I can work that into my presentation that I'm so thrilled to share with you all, coming right up.
All right, you can go now, Dahl. Thank you.
All right. So let's see, Katie, you've got the presentation coming up. All right, here we go. Well, hello, committee members. Dowa Hitch. I have the pleasure of serving as the Communication and Public Engagement Director for the city. It's a real pleasure to be here today and give the committee an update on our ARPA project, and specifically the hybrid meeting component of the ARPA project that is inclusive and accessible government. So next slide. Few key takeaways. I know we've done a few of these presentations, but just to remind our audience that the ARPA Inclusive and Accessible Government Project seeks to improve neighborhood resilience by addressing barriers to communication and engagement. That's what's really driving our work with this project. Certainly hybrid meetings improve accessibility and decision making. And as a reminder, there are 4 components to the Inclusive and Accessible Government Project. One being hybrid meetings, which we'll be talking about today. The other 3 components are a community engagement academy, language accessibility improvements, and upfits of community spaces for access to local government. Next slide. All right, so again, today we're here to share some information about hybrid meetings. The total project budget for this ARPA project is just over $500,000. 140 of that is direct money to the community in those different areas that are listed below, being community center upfits, capacity building, facilitator, plus stipends, and then sign language interpreters. Just a few of the items that are going directly back into the community. And then indirect, we've got some updates that we're making to our broadcast system and for hybrid meeting technology. Next slide. All right, so if we're beginning with the end in mind, what we're aiming for is that all people have access to decision-making and feel welcome to participate. Some completed milestones we've had since our last presentation, which was in February. In the January to February timeframe, we were working on an environmental scan, just understanding what other cities and communities are doing in this area. March through May, we were really hunkered down looking into what some different equipment requirements would be and what the staff capacity and resources, staff capacity that we have, resources that would be needed to sustain hybrid meeting models. And then we were scheduled here in June to report out and share a recommendation to this committee. So really happy to be at this point today and just want to give kudos to the team that's worked so hard to get us as far as we are today. Next slide. All right, I'm going to spend just a minute on this slide. It's an important one. So as we move through the following slides, everybody's got an idea of what those green check marks mean. So as we look at some of the different barriers to participation, you can see those listed there on the right. The green checks signify whether or not there are opportunities for the public to watch or listen to a meeting live and to provide comment. And so for each of those barriers, the people that are experiencing them might look a little bit differently. So for example, in the family responsibility barriers, if there is a green checkbox, that could mean that you can listen to a meeting from home if you say need to care for an elderly parent or a child, and you could possibly participate prior to the meeting or be able to call into the meeting. But the foundation there is that you may have a challenge coming to a physical in-person meeting because of your family responsibility. So I did just want to note and be very transparent that each one of those might look a little bit different, but how we can minimize those barriers might look a little bit different. And I'm happy to answer any questions about that as we move through. So as an example, if it says checkmark responsibility, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to have childcare services available at a meeting in this particular scenario. Councilmember Roney?
So I'm hearing you say that we should ask the questions as we go.
Yes, if that works for you all, I'm happy to as we work through this section of it. If something needs a little bit more explaining or the thought process behind it.
I think while we have a screen up, it might be helpful to see, like, there's going to be times where folks have multiple and things may change over time. So for example, one of the things that came up at the last Human Relations Commission meeting was that for some folks, there was a concern that while having a virtual meeting might make it more possible for people to address the family responsibility barriers and simultaneously put people in a position of having a technology barrier. That's why the hybrid meeting is the consistent request. Also, we had a situation where a commission member was asked to pay for childcare. So I wasn't sure if we're going to talk about that at some point in here, but if there are funds available for doing direct and indirect funding to address barriers, where childcare fits in here if we're not going to do it.
Yeah, I'm so grateful for you or raising that point because for this particular presentation, I want to make sure that I've communicated that those check marks are related to accessibility for the public as opposed to accessibility for board and commission members. So thank you so much for asking that. I do know, of course, we're working very closely with the city clerk's office as we work through these different opportunities. And I do know that they are currently researching and assessing accessibility options for members. So thank you. I hope that answers that portion of your question.
Yeah, I do see the note here, and I think it just helps if folks are listening or to the archive or at home. We are talking about like that open meetings kind of policy engagement where it's for the people who aren't at the table.
All right. Did I hear somebody else or was there another question?
Just a quick note, Dawa, in keeping with what you mentioned around the work that the city clerk's office is doing, that effort is in concert with the Department of Equity and Inclusion, and updates on our work regarding accommodations for board and commission members is something that we're planning to suggest as a work plan item for fiscal year 24 to come back to the Equity and Engagement Committee for further discussion. So that's something that'll be on the horizon for your consideration.
Will that be part of our work plan here or the boards and commissions committee or both?
Probably both. We definitely want this group to be looking at it from the equity lens and then want feedback from the boards and commissions committee regarding barriers for membership to boards and commissions.
Thank you.
Okay, so next slide, we'll get into the weeds a little bit. So this next portion of the presentation, these next couple of slides, focus on our current state to just let everybody know where we are today. As that relates to boards and commissions, currently either all members are in person or all members are virtual. So that's happening either in the, if they are virtual or if they are in person, they are happening in the first floor conference room. This slide here in front of us is focused on the situation where all members are in person. So for those meetings that are happening in the first floor conference room, the opportunities that the public has is to watch in person, be in the room, or watch a stream. They can listen by phone and they can comment during the meeting or prior to the meeting. So the opportunity to participate is prior to the meeting. If you wanted to do it through a voicemail or email, those can be read to the board and commission members, or if you're in the room, of course, commenting during a meeting. And so you can see there that there is an opportunity for each of the major barriers that we're looking at with that particular, with delivering a meeting in that way. Councilmember Roney?
Okay, I think my confusion around this part when I reviewed it in advance and then just hearing you say it is that right now our process is really scattered and it makes it hard to tell people what to expect. For example, during the Urban Forestry Commission meeting, we have elements that are already kind of hybrid because people can call in and make comment, but also because we have to be able with a virtual meeting to have presenters at the same time. So it's kind of the infrastructure is already there. And yet for the Multimodal Transportation Commission, we just had this big issue unfold where folks wanted to participate. They participated too early. They were told the comments were emailed in, were going to be read. They weren't read or they were confused about when. And I think all of that's coming from just a lack of consistency.
Yeah.
So it kind of, I think it might help if there was a way to coordinate with an example. Like, here's the list, here's our goal. It's in our work plan that we're going to follow up on this. And here's an example of how we do it.
How we do to make sure I understand how we're currently doing it in our current state now. Is that what I'm hearing? That it would be helpful to just say, maybe to group them together and say these boards and commissions are doing it this way and these are doing it this way?
Or it might look like the Urban Forestry Commission is going to meet and we're going to do these things in addition, or because the Human Relations Commission meets in person right now. It'd be like, you can do these things and the way we're going to change it to improve it is this list. And this is what you could expect.
Gotcha.
And if there was a way to like make it so not just so we can see, because that would add to my understanding, but so the public could understand and be able to see the improvements of what you and your team are doing. Because it's so scattered all over the place, what we're doing right now, it would be really hard to see a metric of like how we're moving the needle.
Right. Yes. I thank you for that. And that consistency is critical. And we are certainly in a place where we're balancing the two, the flexibility for it to work for the members and then consistency for the public so they know what to expect, and really appreciate that feedback. And it started to come to light in putting this presentation together, just wanting to be consistent about what each of these options offer so that it's very clear for people to see up there in those bulleted. Because on the right-hand side of this slide, you can see that there are some boards and commissions that are holding in-person meetings in places that are not the first floor conference room. And we can clearly see here that there are a number of barriers that are not addressed if those meetings are just happening solely in person and there's not the streaming ability while the meeting's happening live. All right, so next slide. So this is still boards and commissions, and this is the situation where all members are virtual. Again, we've got opportunities for all of those barriers to be addressed. And in the all virtual option, you can watch a stream, you can listen live by phone, and you can comment prior to the meeting. Next slide.
Except for when you can comment live in the meeting. So once again, just that.
Yes. And we will continue to work closely with the city clerk's office just to make sure that we've got a grasp. With so many boards and commissions, we want to make sure that we really have a grasp on how everybody's handling them. Because again, it's a decentralized approach right now with staff liaisons who have a million other things that they're also trying to do, leading that charge. And we're certainly finding that there's some opportunities there to improve consistency, which we'll get here and we'll talk a little bit more about in the next few slides. So yes, here we go. On to the recommendation. To that point, staff's recommendation is that we move all boards and commissions to the hybrid meeting model. And what that means is that members can participate in person or virtually off-site. The public can participate prior to the meeting or in real time. And that's a significant shift from what we have right now. To reflect back in the streaming version of our boards and commission meetings, you can participate as a member of the public, but it's prior to the meeting if you're not in the room. So that is a change that we would see, that you could participate just as we did during COVID with city council meetings, where you can call in, participate in the meeting in real time and not be in the room. Then the third piece is that the public can participate in person or virtually. And there we mean by phone or by Google Meet. And that's certainly something that we have heard from folks, that they would like that opportunity to be able to not only rely on the phone. And we think we've got some, with boards and commissions, especially in the number of people that typically participate, we think that's a good place for us to test out what it looks like to bring people into a Google Meet instead of only having the phone as the option for participation. So that's the first one. There's some things that come along with that recommendation. So in the next slide, we'll talk about some of the requirements if that is indeed a recommendation that the committee would like us to move forward on. The first is that all boards and commissions would need to meet in a space that's outfitted with the appropriate technology. So in this model, it's taking it up a level, and to be able to manage any comment from people that are off-site, or if some board and commission members are in the room and others aren't, we really need to be able to use a switcher to switch the video inputs from one to the other to have a better user experience. So that means that that's not the kind of equipment you can put in a backpack and take out to do a virtual meeting. So just making sure that the mics in the room, all of that are set up for that would be our recommendation, that we only go this route if we have that commitment. And that's for production quality and people's experience with the meeting. So we would also need to look to make sure that board and commission meetings are scheduled to avoid overlap. And that is because we are recommending that there's a dedicated staff member to produce the hybrid meeting situation. And there's a lot of reasons why, and we've listed some of them here. Some of those are that we would have the opportunity to then, with that person in the room, do video chaptering of the meetings. That means for anybody that's going back to see the meeting, they can look at a timestamp and go to an agenda item, which is definitely an improvement over where we are now. You kind of have to, it's not ideal, and we know that and we're working towards it, but you have to guess and scroll through the meeting, and it can be frustrating, and this would definitely be an improvement. There would also be less stress on board and commission staff liaisons. We've heard a lot from them that it's just a lot to try to be there in your role as a staff liaison and worry about the technology. Things come up, and we know they're going to come up. For example, we've had meetings where the laptop that the meeting's being produced on had an update, and so it restarted, which crashed our meeting connection. And if you're participating in the meeting and having to catch that happened, there are some vulnerabilities there for us in our production quality. Yes, Councilmember Turner.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo that because I'm thinking about the downtown commission meetings, which are hybrid, and it's a little bit wonky. It doesn't quite feel like we have our groove with that yet, and there's a few people going, "Does this go here?" And so I agree. I just wanted to support this because I think, yeah, it felt a little rough.
Yeah.
So to clarify, now we had a question earlier this week. Is the African American Heritage Commission already hybrid? And it sounds like now the Downtown Commission is already hybrid.
That's a good question, but we did have, it's kind of rough. It's the video camera in the back of the room. It looks like a laptop on a tripod. It has wires coming and going. The sound isn't great. And then we added screens in that room so that you could see the agenda behind the people. It's really close, but I think to Dawa's point, like this person that really knows how to run the system, like Dan is for us, we need a Dan for boards and committees because it just isn't, it doesn't go smoothly.
Technical issues. I'm also just really kind of confused around how the equity rollout is of this when we have boards and commissions that are being charged for childcare while other groups get to just move forward. Seems strange to me. It doesn't seem like that was our goal, but maybe it was just haphazard.
I don't know. Yeah, that's a good point.
It is, and certainly I know the city clerk's office has done a whole lot of work in this area, and knowing, I to be frank, I think this was one of those, let's not let perfect be the enemy of good. And so we put it in the hands of the boards and commissions to identify what worked best for them, knowing that we had this work underway. And it is different across the board, and certainly worth revisiting. And again, we are committed to and work very closely with the city clerk's office as we continue to.
I appreciate that, Dawa. I think there has to be some onus on us when we're talking about what our priorities are. For example, making sure that groups aren't getting charged for childcare is way more important to me than the tremendous added benefit of convenience that video chaptering is. And someone who's done video editing and audio editing for over 2 decades, it is going to be a lot of work. So I just wanted to own that, like, as far as priorities go, making sure that we are not losing members of boards and commissions because we've been telling them that we're going to prioritize making their meetings hybrid, other meetings going hybrid first because we were trying to do video chaptering, just seems like like the priorities might be a little off. So for me, like, I'm looking at this first recommendation, I'm like, maybe we need a status bar on like what our biggest wishes are to do this. And for me, video chaptering just falls down below, like, logistically finding a path forward for our boards and commissions that have deep need.
I'll just note, Councilmember Roney, that I totally understand the point you're making. It's different staff that are working on the effort around accommodations for boards and commission members, ultimately leading towards reducing barriers for their participation in board and commission members, and the work around video chaptering. So that would not be the same staff from a capacity issue. And we will be ready. I haven't had an opportunity to talk to Brenda specifically when, but within the next few months with an update on that work that's going on with the Department of Equity and Inclusion, as well as the clerk's office. I also got a note from our deputy city clerk that neither of the boards that were referenced are hybrid. They're both virtual meetings that are streamed live.
So the Downtown Commission doesn't have members that are in the room and members that are virtual? Okay.
All very good questions, and all it speaks to the complexity of this when we have so many that are doing so many things. It is even for us on staff trying to keep up with who's doing what is challenging, and has certainly informed this recommendation to
Right before you go there too,
Yeah.
I just want to say that imagine that if it's hard for us to keep track
Right.
of this, it has got to be so hard for the public to keep track. Like the fact that I don't know this, you're not really sure about this. We're always still asking questions and adding to each other's understanding, and we have the inside scoop. So just wanted
Yeah.
to name that.
Yes, I absolutely appreciate that, and our commitment to clear communication. So real quick, just a few other things. I did just want to, in addition to the dedicated staff producing a hybrid meeting, these bullets are just some of the things, some of the value adds that we would see bringing on that person again. So that's mastery of troubleshooting, because there's always gremlins in systems. And that consistency, reliability, and efficiency piece is a really important part of that. And then finally, just managing all of the video archives of public meetings so that they are accessible to the public. So it just tightens things up. It maybe centralizes in some way with a healthy respect to cross-departmental collaboration. Next slide. Costs. People are understandably, and we all should be concerned about costs as good stewards of the taxpayer dollar. Just wanted to note that currently the dedicated staff position is being funded through ARPA, and it's through that position that we've been able to get these details and start to pull together what a hybrid meeting opportunity would look like. And we would need to consider a request in the FY25 budget process, or decide what we will do differently. So that's influenced why we are coming to you here today, knowing in the next few months, we're going to be launching into another budget process, and just want to make sure you all have all the information that you need so that we can then reflect that in any budget requests that we have into this coming fiscal year. Then there's the equipment cost, where our estimate is that we could do some upgrades to the first floor conference room with equipment in there, and that would be in the $10,000 to $15,000 estimate. And then I wanted to highlight the second bullet. It could be that it would be beneficial for there to be a second site that's fully equipped to be able to do to produce hybrid meetings. And so if we needed to do that, we'd probably be looking at about 10,000. It's not something that we've explored, just wanted to put that out there, and certainly to assure the committee that if we cannot accommodate the schedules in the first floor conference room, we will certainly use an equity lens in identifying where an additional city-owned site might be. Next slide.
Can you confirm something for me, Dawa? This fund would not be out of the operational budget. It would be from the existing ARPA budget, the way I'm reading it.
That the funding for the equipment, yes. A dedicated staff person would need to be general fund.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. All right. So some folks that have been tapped into the community space upfit component of the ARPA project might be wondering, well, wait a minute, you said a city-owned site and you might have, produce meetings from there. How does that match up with the community space upfit component? And I wanted to make sure I've shared exactly what we mean by that. So the aim of the community space upfit component is so that the community members can participate remotely, as opposed to being able to produce a meeting from that site. So if you want to think back to the Reparations Speaker Series, where we were able to pipe people into a meeting, that just means in those spaces where people can walk and get access to easily, they could go and have that technology option if they'd like to be brought into, say, a meeting that's being produced from the first floor conference room. And then, so the hosting of that is where it's important. And again, it's from the first floor conference room where we're able to do all the digital video switching, again, producing the meeting. They would just be an input into that meeting, those community space upfit opportunities that are coming in this next year. So just wanted to take a minute on that. I know I've had lots of questions about that out in the community, like what's the difference between the two, and wanted to just make sure I cover that in this presentation. Next slide.
So if we could go back to that one for an example, because I think I understand this from the host perspective. Let's say that you're going to have reparations IFA meetings around economic development and education. As long as the host location was either the first floor conference room or a potential second room, the second meeting could be piped in from a community center. And right now, that would only be like community center to the host of the first floor conference room, but we're looking at adding a second hosting site location. Let's say that was Stevens Lee or something like that. You could do the same thing from a community center to that second location.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yep, that's it exactly. All right, next slide. So these next couple of slides will move pretty quickly because we've really been spending the majority of our time on boards and commissions. So now we are moving on to council committees. Currently, council committees are all virtual. You can see that they address the barriers in some way in the table to the right. Staff's recommendation is that we keep council committee meetings virtual. And to just note, that means members can participate virtually off-site and the public can participate prior to the meeting or in real time by telephone. So the components that are required for that are a phone and Google Meet input option. Next slide. Third recommendation, this has to do with city council meetings. So currently we are in person with pre-meeting comment options, as well as of course in the meeting comment options. The recommendation here from a production perspective is that we keep city council meetings in person until all board and commission meetings are moved to hybrid, and then revisit interest in hybrid public participation in council meetings if council has an interest in that. And the distinction there is important. As I'm watching our amazing city attorney, Brad Branham, just want to be very clear that in this case, we are talking about, are there options to pipe people into the city council chamber for some kind of comment, knowing that under our current statutes, I believe all of our council members need to be there. So just didn't want anybody in the public to get confused that we're talking about some council members serving a council meeting from home and some in the chamber. This situation is everybody in the chamber. So with that, you can see, again, with this option we have for council members, there are barriers that are addressed. The public can submit comment for consideration pre-meeting or in person. The public can listen by phone. They can watch a streamed meeting, or they can watch channel 193. So that ability to comment ahead of time, and then through all of those different channels, some which have translations through closed captioning or closed captioning, those are the ways that we're dealing with some of those accessibility barriers currently. Next slide. All right, key takeaways. Neighborhood resilience is what's driving this work. Hybrid meetings certainly improve accessibility and decision-making. There's 4 components to our accessible and inclusive government project. Today we talked about hybrid meetings, and the recommendation was to move all board and commission meetings to the hybrid model, being produced out of a fully outfitted room, being the first floor conference room due to the technology requirements that we have. That concludes my presentation. I want to go to the next slide, I think, just to give some honor to, there we go. Just want to appreciate Ricardo and the work they did. Councilmember Roney.
Yes, thank you, Ricardo. If you're watching, glad to see La Ciudad de Asheville in the mix. I have a couple questions around logistics. One, are we using a new kind of software that we're going to be implementing? If so, is there another city that uses it? Is it existing equipment and software that we had that we're just using a different way?
It's the latter. So we're still building this whole model off of the public input software that we used during COVID for city council meetings. That gives us the phone accessibility, the YouTube stream. They all speak to each other. The new piece for us would be that we have not switched. So the team has been looking at what other cities are doing, reaching out, I think, to Land of Sky. I know they've got I know they've reached out to Land of Sky. They've got a pretty good production quality for their meetings. And so learning from them, we've got some different kinds of cameras that we've been testing out as well. So essentially it's the same things with an added piece or two to just up the production quality.
That really helps because I've participated in the Land of Sky meetings for the MPO, both in the room and virtually. And there have been times like there might be an internet connectivity issue, but you can still access it by phone. There seems to be able to be heard from both sides, and we haven't had a lot of lagging. So are there any like specific differences that you're noting, like this isn't going to work for us the way that it works for Land of Sky? Or have you not identified those yet?
That nothing has bubbled to the top, especially in the areas of delays and things like that. The one place, I mean, there's a couple second with YouTube from real live in the room. The greatest challenge we see in that area is typically our broadcast. Just because we don't have the option of HD. Those are the ones that have like a little bit more of a delay. But yeah, nothing has jumped out as being a particular barrier for us to be able to move towards that level, that quality.
More questions?
Are you asking for action on this recommendation?
Yeah, so I think there is one more slide. Katie passed this last one. It's just got them all listed there together. Can we bring that one up, or we can move? Back in the, yep. There we go. So we are, staff is.
That is the last slide on the presentation, this one.
Okay. So the staff recommendation that we're looking for guidance from the committee is whether or not we should move all boards and commissions to hybrid meetings. That was the first one.
So moved.
Second.
All right, I'll do a roll call vote. Councilwoman Roney,
Aye.
Councilwoman Turner,
Aye.
and myself, aye. The motion carries.
All right, the second recommendation was that we keep council meetings virtual. Council committee, council committee. Careful about these words. Council committee meetings virtual.
I'll move.
Second.
All right, I'll do a roll call vote. Councilwoman Turner,
Aye.
Councilwoman Roney,
Aye.
and myself, aye. Motion carries.
And the third recommendation was that we keep city council meetings in person only until all board and commission meetings are moved to hybrid, and then revisit city council's interest in hybrid participation for public comment in city council meetings.
I have a question about this one. Because it made me realize that we're making a recommendation for our advisory boards, our boards and commissions, right? But there are some state mandated groups that we make appointments to, I think specifically of planning and zoning. Can planning and zoning be hybrid?
Now, maybe I'll chime in and answer that question if I could.
Please, Brad.
Yes, thank you. So this is something that as of today, the General Assembly has not provided the kind of definitive answer that I would love to be able to provide this committee with. We have been going over some potential legislation during this particular session of General Assembly, but nothing has come to complete fruition yet on this. And I would say that today there is still a question about whether or not these groups are able to meet in any other fashion other than in person. And I will add this. There is a very specific limitation against any group conducting quasi-judicial hearings from meeting any other way than in person, because it creates a number of challenges. So I will say that there are occasions where the Planning and Zoning Board does have to conduct a quasi-judicial hearing along with our Board of Adjustment. And in those cases, they have to meet in person. So I think we've taken the position, along with the request of the board members themselves, that we would have those particular bodies continue to meet in person.
Thank you. And so I guess I was curious what that means for Board of Adjustment and other groups. But for me, I feel like while our city council meetings are so important for people to be able to access, it does feel like to me if we start with boards and commissions, because our volunteer advisors have been waiting so long for this option, and because we've run into some serious roadblocks with people being able to participate in the way that's best for them, both for virtual and in-person meetings, that it feels like 1 and 2 are like a phasing in. Is that how staff is feeling? Like if we make a recommendation for 3 that includes until all boards and commission meetings are moved to hybrid, then to me that is supporting a phasing in. And that's what I'm hearing as your recommendation. Do I have that right?
It is, and I think that it had, well, and I don't think, I know what influenced that was certainly the weight of a council meeting, knowing that that's our most complex meeting that we have, really making sure that we've got good data, we've got some experience with what that looks like in practice before we would move those formal meetings of the full council to that area. So I guess, yes, phasing in, and that we want to make sure that we've got opportunities to really learn and have real-time experience with it, and thinking that doing that first with our advisory boards would be the smartest, and we would have the most latitude, knowing that there aren't, during every single board and commission meetings, really whether it's safety oriented or if there's legislation or statutes that relate to it. I mean, I guess the risk is a little bit smaller in most board and commission meetings than, of course, it would be for a full council meeting.
I hear that. And especially just on a much smaller level, the Multimodal Transportation Commission did come up as like, all right, as an example, if we aren't really consistent at the smaller level, then when we get feedback that something isn't working, it makes it harder to adjust. So I moved to recommend the third recommendation regarding city council meetings in person only until board and commission meetings are moved to hybrid, and then revisit city council interest in hybrid participation for public comment in city council meetings.
I'll second.
All right, do a roll call vote for approval. Councilwoman Turner,
Aye.
Councilwoman Roney.
Aye.
Myself, motion carries. Thank you, Dawa.
Thank you all so much. I appreciate your time.
And thank you again to Brenda. Katie, do we have anyone to speak to?
Checking right now, one moment.
Okay,
No, we do not.
okay. Something came up during the presentation a few times. Councilwoman Roney, you brought up that maybe a commission member or board member was forced to pay childcare. I want some more information.
We were just told that they would be. That I will say is because that was the situation where we talked about in this group, we talked about boards and commissions. There wasn't a quorum. Sorry, there wasn't a supermajority at the Human Relations Commission in person to vote to go to virtual. So by default of our own rules, which were meant to make it so that a small group wouldn't be able to pull the meeting in one way or the other, an outcome of that was that we had a group who needed to meet virtually, but was forced to meet in person to vote to go virtual, and then couldn't get the supermajority because of the barriers. So it just created this big mess. It was very clear that members wouldn't be able to participate if there wasn't childcare available. And then the email communication that I saw was that they were going to be charged, I think it was like $15 or $17 an hour. I can't remember what the final number was. And so a big question came up is like, how can we help support in the community this member to still be able to sit at the table while meeting the childcare recommendation that's created by the rules that we caused? So I was just wondering, like, how can we get to this point where if we're going to say that we do equity, like how does it show up in real time? If there are morning meetings where folks have some built-in childcare, but the evening meetings where kids are out of school are considered later, like how can we get those evening meetings to just jump to the front of the line on this hybrid process? If anything's going to get tested, you know, can it be the meetings that start in the evening or the meetings that when they made motions, can that be considered as a request? So it's not so much this group, but I think that there's a responsibility of this group to maybe make recommendations to boards and commissions committee. I serve on both, so I'm like, please, can we make some connects here?
I think I'm still trying to digest the story, because you said that in order a supermajority was needed and they had to be in person, but they voted to go virtual.
They couldn't vote to go virtual because they didn't have a supermajority that could attend in person to do it. So then by default, they had to meet in person because they didn't have enough people to vote to go virtual. So now we've had multiple meetings over and over again. There's even possibly going to be on another future agenda. Brenda, maybe you'll speak to that. We've had multiple times where it's like, is this the meeting where there's enough people to meet? And then at the last meeting, the members I heard say, well, we're having such important conversations in person, maybe we need to keep it in person. So if we do that, then there's going to be a childcare cost, and we're going to need to address that. And it seems like such an interesting position to be in, where I know that we've help pay for people's parking tickets if there was an issue. I know that we've said we will be able to do translation services potentially, especially if we need to do sign language for folks. So somewhere there's got to be a budget where we can pull childcare. I don't have the answer to that from a boards and commissions standpoint yet, but I know that it's an equity issue.
And did that individual work out their childcare issue? Are they okay right now?
The city did not resolve the child care issue. That the member and community members assisted in that.
Alrighty.
And just to kind of loop back, all of the reasons that Councilmember Roney cited are the reason why we have the organizational effort that's being led by the City Clerk's Office and the Department of Equity and Inclusion. To the credit of the departments that are assigned boards and commissions, it has been very decentralized, and we do want to have some standards in place. One, to have predictability to the public, but then also to make sure that we're reducing barriers for participation on boards and commissions. So we acknowledge that this is something that we need to have more direction provided to the departments. And I just want to note that we appreciate departments trying to be as accommodating as possible. We just have not been very equitable in how that has been interpreted, given the decentralized process that we've had for each of the departments that are assigned advisory boards. So something that we acknowledge we need to work on. And as I mentioned, we do plan on coming back to both this committee as well as the boards and commissions committee with updates on that effort.
All right, thank you, Rachel. Thank you, everybody, for your attendance and participation. We'll see you all next month.